I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to Nathan, my husband, for over a decade. We have 2 kids, Lily, who's 8, and Max, who's 6. From the outside, we probably seem like a typical family. But if you dig a little deeper, there's one issue that's been poisoning my life since the day I married Nathan, his mother, Margaret. Margaret is the kind of woman who acts sweet in front of company, but has a way of making you feel small when no one's watching. She's never liked me. She doesn't say it outright, of course. Instead, she does it in little ways, comments about my parenting, digs at my career, comparisons to my sister-in-law, Susan. Susan, according to Margaret, is the perfect wife. She stays home with the kids, makes elaborate home-cooked meals, and always looks put together. Meanwhile, I work in tech. My job is demanding, and I'm not home baking cookies or attending every school event. I do my best, but according to Margaret, it's never enough. It started small. Backhanded compliments about how impressive it was that Nathan was handling things so well despite my job. Subtle remarks about how kids need their mothers at home. But over time, she got bolder. She'd make comments in front of the kids, planting doubts in their minds. It was always little things. Lily, do you think mommy will remember to pick you up on time today? Max, I used to pack the most wonderful lunches for your daddy when he was your age. It's a shame your mom is too busy to do the same. Nathan always told me to ignore her, that she was just old-fashioned and didn't mean harm. But I knew better. Margaret knew exactly what she was doing. Then, one day, she crossed a line. We were visiting her house for the weekend, something I never looked forward to but tolerated for Nathan's sake. I had stepped outside to take a work call, leaving the kids in the living room with Margaret. When I came back, I found Lily sitting on the couch, her eyes red-rimmed and her lower lip trembling. Max looked confused, his little brows furrowed. I crouched down in front of them. What's wrong? Lily looked at me and hesitated. Then, in the smallest voice, she said, "Did you only have us so daddy wouldn't leave you?" The room spun for a second. I barely registered the sound of Margaret sipping her tea like nothing had happened. I glanced at Max, who was waiting for my answer like he wasn't sure what to believe. What? I managed to ask. Margaret let out a little laugh. Oh, don't look at me like that. We were just chatting. I was telling them how some women feel pressure to have babies, that's all. But I knew that wasn't all. I turned back to Lily. Who told you that? She glanced at her grandmother but said nothing. Margaret smiled, like she had done nothing wrong. I stood up. Nathan. My voice was sharp enough that he came into the room immediately. He took one look at my face and then at our daughter, still holding back tears. What happened? Before I could speak, Margaret chimed in. Oh, honestly, stop being so dramatic. I was just having a conversation with the kids. They misunderstood. Nathan looked at her, then at me. I could see the moment he realized something was very, very wrong. What did you say to them? She sighed like she was the one being inconvenienced. I simply said that their mother was always so busy with work that she never seemed like the type who wanted children. That's all. It's the truth, isn't it? The way she said it, so casual, like she hadn't just put a knife in my daughter's heart. I clenched my fists. Nathan's face turned red. That's not a conversation you get to have with our kids. Oh, don't be ridiculous. I'm their grandmother. I'm just being honest. I took a step closer. You don't get to decide what my children believe about me. Margaret rolled her eyes. Well, if you were around more, maybe they wouldn't have to wonder. That was it. I turned to the kids. Go get your bags. Nathan looked at me, then at his mother, then back at me. We're leaving, I said. Margaret scoffed. Oh, don't be silly. I apologized. No, I cut her off. You didn't. Lily and Max rushed to grab their things, and Nathan, for once, didn't try to argue. He looked at his mother like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he turned away. We packed up and left without another word. That night when we got home, I sat in the dark thinking. This wasn't just one comment. It was a pattern. Margaret had been undermining me for years. This was just the first time I had caught her red-handed. I thought about how she'd dismiss everything if I confronted her again. How she'd gaslight us into thinking it was all a misunderstanding. And then I got an idea. I had been browsing online for Christmas gifts earlier that week. One thing that had caught my eye was a customizable dollhouse. It had tiny furniture, little lights, everything a person could want in a perfect miniature home. And suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had skills. I worked in tech. I knew how to install small, discreet speakers. I knew how to record things. I knew how to play them back on command. Margaret had spent years using words as weapons. Now I was going to make sure she heard every single one of them. Margaret didn't change. Even after we walked out of her house that day, even after Nathan confronted her, she carried on as if nothing had happened. The passive-aggressive remarks didn't stop. If anything, she got smarter about them. Instead of direct attacks, she wrapped them in careful wording, making sure they sounded just vague enough that calling her out would make us look like the unreasonable ones. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to Lily while she was helping her braid her hair. Some mothers just aren't naturally maternal, she murmured, like she was sharing a secret. They struggle to love their kids the way a real mother should. But that doesn't mean it's your fault, sweetheart. You're still such a lovely girl. Another time, she was with Max, watching him build with his toy blocks. You know, when your dad was your age, he was always so careful. So smart. He never needed help with anything. He just knew how to do things better than other kids. She smiled at him, her voice warm, but I saw the way Max's shoulders tensed, how his little fingers clutched the blocks tighter. Whenever Nathan or I confronted her, she played the same game. A tilt of the head, a dramatic sigh. Oh, come on, you really think I would say something so awful? I was just making conversation. You're being too sensitive. And just like that, the conversation would turn, making us look like the ones creating problems. I stopped reacting. Instead, I focused on the plan. Every night after the kids were asleep, I worked in my office, modifying the dollhouse. The speakers were small, hidden in the walls behind the miniature furniture. I programmed them to play recordings at intervals, quiet at first, but gradually getting louder, impossible to ignore. Finding the audio was easier than I expected. Margaret had left a trail over the years. Old voice messages she had sent, nanny cam footage from when she babysat the kids, even fresh recordings I made by casually keeping my phone nearby when she spoke. It was all there, the passive-aggressive remarks, the subtle jabs, the manipulation. I pieced them together, choosing the ones that would expose her the most. The timing had to be perfect. Nathan's brother and his wife, Susan, were hosting Christmas Eve dinner. It was tradition, big gathering, extended family, plenty of witnesses. The dollhouse would be the grand gift for the kids, something they would be excited about, something everyone would pay attention to. Margaret would never suspect a thing. I ran tests for days. I set up the dollhouse in my office and let the speakers play on a loop, making small adjustments to ensure everything worked seamlessly. The recordings would begin softly, almost like a whisper, then repeat, gradually growing clearer. The effect would be undeniable. Meanwhile, Margaret continued as she always did, completely unaware. She even bragged to Susan about how influential she was over the kids, claiming that I was too emotional to handle their upbringing properly. Nathan had been quiet lately, watching, listening. I could see the shift in him. Before, he had always tried to see the best in his mother. But now, every time she opened her mouth around our children, I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way he clenched his hands at his sides. He was seeing her clearly now. Margaret, on the other hand, was smug. She started bringing little gifts for the kids whenever she visited, slipping them small treats and whispering to them about how grandmothers always knew best. She was securing her influence, confident that nothing could shake it. A few days before Christmas Eve, I casually mentioned to her that I was getting a big present for the kids. I didn't say what it was, just that it was something special. She barely hesitated before asking if it was age-appropriate and if I was sure it was a good idea. She never missed an opportunity to imply I didn't know what I was doing as a parent. I smiled and assured her it would be perfect. The final test run went flawlessly. The speakers activated on cue, the recordings played in sequence, and the timing was just right. When the dollhouse was placed in a room full of people, there would be no way for Margaret to deny what came next. Christmas Eve arrived. Nathan and I arrived at his brother's house with the kids, the dollhouse carefully wrapped and waiting in the car. Margaret greeted us with her usual exaggerated warmth, hugging Lily and Max just a little too long, making a point to ignore me until she had no choice but to acknowledge my presence. I smiled at her like nothing was wrong. Dinner was exactly what I expected, Margaret chatting animatedly with Susan, making sly remarks whenever the conversation turned to me, and pretending not to notice when Nathan cut her off. But I didn't react. I waited. After dinner, it was time for presents. The kids tore through their gifts, excited squeals filling the room. Then came the dollhouse. Lily's eyes lit up the second she saw it. Max clapped his hands, already reaching to open it. Margaret beamed. Oh, what a lovely little home. Isn't it wonderful how some mothers show love through gifts when they can't always be present? I kept my expression neutral. The kids settled in front of the dollhouse, playing with the miniature furniture, their tiny hands moving pieces around. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Then, the first whisper. Soft. Almost too quiet to notice. Margaret didn't react. No one did. A few seconds passed, and the whisper came again. Clearer this time. Lily paused, glancing up. Another pause. Then the next line. Margaret's own voice, laced with the same condescending sweetness she always used. Some mothers just aren't naturally maternal. They struggle to love their kids the way a real mother should. The chatter in the room dimmed. Susan turned her head slightly, frowning. A few seconds later, another recording played. You know, when your dad was your age, he was always so careful. So smart. He just knew how to do things better than other kids. Margaret stiffened. The whispers continued, growing louder. Snippets of her own words, her own voice, echoing from the tiny house in the middle of the room. Margaret's face went pale. The conversations had stopped now. Everyone was looking at the dollhouse. At her. I didn't say a word. I just watched as realization set in. She wasn't getting out of this one. The room was silent. Margaret's voice echoed through the air, soft at first, like a whisper from nowhere. Mothers like yours always regret having kids. The laughter and conversation around the dinner table faded. A few people glanced around, confused. Nathan's brother frowned and asked if someone left the TV on. Margaret was frozen, her hand hovering over her plate. Lily, still sitting on the floor beside the dollhouse, looked up, her little brows furrowed. Max's fingers curled around one of the tiny furniture pieces inside, holding it too tightly. A few moments passed. The chatter slowly picked up again, though quieter this time. Some assumed they had misheard. Others, like Nathan, were already watching. Then, the second voice played. Clearer, louder. Your mother only had you to keep your father around. The room shifted. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Forks paused midway to mouths. Margaret's head snapped toward the dollhouse. The voice was unmistakable. It was hers. She blinked rapidly, her lips parting slightly, but no words came out. Her hands, resting on the tablecloth, trembled just enough for me to notice. Susan turned to her husband. Did you hear that? Nathan was already staring at Margaret, his knuckles white against his glass. Margaret forced a breathy laugh, shaking her head. What a strange malfunction. What is this? Some kind of toy with preloaded phrases. She turned to me, her expression carefully controlled. Where did you buy this? I didn't answer. No one else spoke either. The third playback hit harder than the last two. The voice had been recorded only days before, still dripping with that signature fake warmth Margaret used when she wanted to plant seeds of doubt. She barely spends time with you. I bet she wishes she never had kids. Lily's face fell. Her hands dropped to her lap, fingers twisting together as if trying to process what she had just heard. Max turned his head toward me. His little voice broke the silence. Mom? Margaret shot up from her seat, eyes darting around. All right, enough. This is ridiculous. She turned sharply to Nathan. Turn it off. Someone's playing a joke. Nathan didn't move. She turned to his brother next. This is absurd. Some glitch, some sick, another snippet played, cutting her off. You're lucky I'm here to teach you how a real mother should act. Nathan stood. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp in the silence. How many times? His voice was low, steady. Margaret blinked at him, still trying to maintain control. How many times have you said things like this to our kids? His fists were clenched at his sides. How much have you been whispering in their ears behind our backs? Susan exhaled sharply, exchanging a quick glance with her husband. The mood in the room had shifted from confusion to something heavier. Margaret let out a shaky laugh, raising her hands. You're all being ridiculous. It's just some technical issue, or maybe someone is messing with. I cut her off. Everything you just heard? You said it? She turned to me, her carefully constructed mask slipping. The dollhouse didn't make it up. No one tampered with it. Every single thing that played is something you actually said. It's to my kids. Margaret's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The room was thick with tension. Nathan's brother leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Mom. His voice was quiet but firm. Tell me she's lying. Margaret's eyes darted to him, then to Susan, then back to Nathan. She let out a huff, trying to regain control. This is ridiculous. She snapped, the sugary tone gone. You all know I would never. Nathan's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists. You've been doing this for years, haven't you? His voice was low, controlled, but there was no mistaking the anger underneath. How many times have you told them things like this? You sat there, he continued, his voice cold, and you tried to turn our kids against their own mother. His breathing was heavy, his face unreadable. You told them their mother didn't love them. You made Lily cry. You made Max doubt himself. And for what? So you could feel superior? Susan shook her head, staring at Margaret like she was seeing her for the first time. I didn't, Margaret started. Lily spoke then. You did. Her voice was small, but the effect was instant. Margaret turned to her, the denial still on her face, but Lily wasn't looking at her. She was looking at me. You said those things, Lily whispered, her eyes welling with tears. You said them to us. Margaret paled. Sweetheart, you misunderstood. Max spoke next. Did you mean it? His little hands clutched the fabric of his pants. Did you mean it when you said Mommy didn't want us? Margaret's face crumbled. Of course not. I love you both so much. I was just... Nathan cut her off. Get out. Margaret froze. What? You heard me. She let out a shaky breath. Nathan, be reasonable. This is our family. You're not my family if you hurt my kids. He shot back. Nathan's brother stood. You should go. Margaret's face twisted, like she was about to argue, but then she saw the way everyone was looking at her. Susan. Nathan. The kids. She turned to me, her lips curling. You did this. I didn't respond. She let out a sharp breath and grabbed her purse, her movements jerky. Fine, she spat, her composure finally cracking. If this is how you all treat me after everything I've done for this family, then I won't waste another second here. She stormed toward the door. No one stopped her. The front door slammed. For a moment, the only sound in the house was the faint crackling of the fireplace. Max shifted closer to me, his small body pressing against my side. Lily crawled onto my lap without a word. Nathan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. This ends tonight. Margaret shot up from her chair, her movements jerky and frantic. The color had drained from her face, but her mouth was already moving, her voice sharp and panicked. This is a setup. Her hands trembled as she pointed around the room, accusing eyes landing on me first, then shifting to Nathan. Someone tampered with that thing. This isn't real. You all know I would never. The words cut off as another recording played. You're lucky I'm here to teach you how a real mother should act. Nathan slammed his glass down on the table so hard it cracked. Margaret flinched. Stop. His voice was sharp, clipped. He pushed his chair back and stood, fists clenched at his sides. Just stop. She blinked up at him, still shaking. Nathan, please, you can't actually believe. Nathan took a step forward. I heard you. My kids heard you. Do you think we're all stupid? That we just imagined it? That this is some kind of trick? Margaret's mouth opened, then closed again. Lily let out a small sob, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her dress. Her little shoulders shook as she sniffled. Why would you say that about Mommy? Margaret's gaze snapped to her. Oh, sweetheart, you're confused. Lily shook her head, scooting back toward me. No, you said those things. You said them. Max, still sitting cross-legged on the floor, looked down at his lap. He wasn't crying, but his small hands gripped his knees tightly. I don't want to talk to you, he muttered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. Margaret sucked in a breath, her expression shifting, calculating. This isn't fair, she said, voice trembling. You're all turning against me. On Christmas Eve, no less. Is this what you wanted? Nathan's brother, Matthew, stood from his seat, raising a hand slightly, as if trying to calm things down. Mom, you need to... Margaret cut him off, shaking her head furiously. No, you need to listen. This is ridiculous. Some glitchy toy says a few things, and suddenly I'm the villain? Nathan's father, who had been quiet up until now, exhaled loudly. Margaret. His voice was tired. You and I both know this isn't a toy malfunction. Margaret turned to him, her eyes flashing. Oh, and you're taking her side now? After everything I've done for this family? Susan's expression flickered with hesitation, but I could see something shifting. She glanced at her own children, then back at Lily and Max. I always thought you were just a little blunt, Margaret. But this is different. Her voice wavered, like she was trying to reconcile years of loyalty with what she had just heard. Margaret scoffed, throwing her hands in the air. Oh, please. As if she hasn't been waiting for a chance to turn you all against me. She's always been disrespectful, always trying to control things with her modern ideas. Nathan took another step forward. This isn't about her. This is about you manipulating our kids. Margaret's jaw tightened. I raised you. Nathan's voice was quiet but firm. And now I'm raising my own kids. And you don't get to poison them against their mother. The room was suffocating with tension. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the crackling of the fireplace and the occasional sniffle from Lily. Max shifted on the floor, his fingers curling into the hem of his sweater. He looked up at me, then at Nathan. Can we go home now? That was it. I stood, reaching for Lily's hand. Nathan nodded, jaw still clenched, and turned toward the door. Margaret took a shaky breath. Nathan, don't do this. We kept walking. Margaret's voice rose, desperate now. She's brainwashing them against me. One day they'll see the truth. They'll know she's a liar. The front door shut behind us. The cold night air hit like a slap. The kids climbed into the car without another word. For the first few minutes of the drive, no one spoke. The road stretched ahead, dark and quiet, except for the occasional glow of passing streetlights. Then Lily's small voice broke the silence. Do I have to see her again? Nathan gripped the steering wheel tighter. No, he said. Not if you don't want to. Max nodded beside her. I don't want to. I reached back, running a hand gently over Max's hair. Lily leaned into her seat, staring out the window, her face unreadable. Nathan exhaled, his grip finally loosening. I should have done something sooner. His voice was low, almost like he was speaking more to himself than anyone else. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He knew the truth now. Christmas morning was different. Margaret didn't call, didn't text. For the first time in years, there was no passive-aggressive message, no grand speech about how we shouldn't let silly disagreements ruin family. Nothing. The house was quiet when we woke up. The kids opened their gifts in their pajamas, giggling and playing with their toys, their voices light and free. Nathan brewed coffee, leaning against the counter, watching them. His expression was unreadable, but he looked settled, like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in a long time, Christmas felt peaceful, but deep down, I knew Margaret wasn't done yet. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Messages flooded in, dozens of them. Missed calls, unread texts, and even a few voicemails. It wasn't just from Margaret. This was from everyone. A few taps revealed the source of the chaos. Margaret had wasted no time spinning the story in her favor. She had sent out a mass message to extended family, painting herself as the victim of an elaborate, tech-savvy prank meant to humiliate her in front of her children and grandchildren. According to her, I had planted fake recordings in a gift just to embarrass her, all because I had never accepted her as part of the family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, some of whom we barely saw more than once a year, were now chiming in, demanding to know if it was true. Nathan sat up next to me, rubbing his face before checking his own phone. His jaw tightened immediately. He started typing furiously. I scrolled through the messages, recognizing the usual patterns. A few relatives were neutral, asking what really happened. Others, particularly the ones who always sided with Margaret, had already made up their minds. I can't believe you'd do this to your children's grandmother. Family isn't something you just cut out over a disagreement. You need to fix this before it's too late. Margaret had made sure they only got her version of events. Nathan didn't hesitate. He started replying to the messages, one by one, making it clear that Margaret's words weren't just misunderstandings or exaggerations. They were real, and they had been aimed at our kids for years. But Margaret wasn't done yet. By midday, she had started calling the house, over and over. The phone rang relentlessly, her name flashing on the screen, each call more persistent than the last. I ignored them at first, but she wasn't giving up. Finally, Nathan answered. I stood in the doorway as he held the phone to his ear, his face unreadable. He didn't speak at first, just listened. I could faintly make out Margaret's voice, shaking, tearful. She was crying. She missed her grandbabies. Nathan glanced toward the living room, where Lily and Max were sitting together on the floor, quietly coloring. They had been extra quiet all morning. Lily, he called, keeping the phone to his ear. Do you want to talk to Grandma? Lily barely looked up. She shook her head. Not until she says sorry for real. Nathan didn't push. Max hesitated, his grip tightening on his crayon. He didn't say anything. Nathan took the phone away from his ear. They don't want to talk right now. Margaret's voice pitched higher. She said something about me turning them against her, about how she was their grandmother and had every right to see them. Nathan ended the call. That night, when I tucked Max into bed, he held onto my arm, a little tighter than usual. Stay? He mumbled. I settled beside him, running a hand over his hair. I'm here. He stayed quiet for a long time before whispering, just in case you go away. That was it. The next day, I called a child therapist. Nathan agreed without hesitation. Lily and Max needed a safe space to talk about what happened, to process it in a way that didn't just leave them confused or hurt. Margaret, meanwhile, refused to let up. When she realized we weren't answering her calls, she started sending long-winded messages, full of half apologies and emotional manipulation. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just want to talk. Please, for the kids. Families don't abandon each other over misunderstandings. When I didn't reply, she escalated. She reached out to mutual friends, to distant relatives. She painted herself as a heartbroken grandmother who had been unfairly cut out of her son's life. The guilt tripping didn't work. By the end of the week, she was sending paragraphs, demanding answers, threatening that we were damaging the family dynamic. Nathan had enough. We called our lawyer. The cease and desist was sent the next morning, making it clear that if she continued harassing us, there would be legal consequences. Margaret lost it. She called Nathan's brother, Matthew, screaming that I was brainwashing Nathan and that I had poisoned him against his own mother. She threatened legal action, claiming she would take us to court for grandparents' rights. That was when Susan reached out. She had been quiet since Christmas Eve, watching everything unfold from the sidelines. At first, she had sided with us. She had seen the truth with her own eyes. But now, after hearing Margaret cry over the phone, she hesitated. She felt bad for her. She's your mother, Nathan. Her words were careful, slow. Are you sure this is the only way? Nathan didn't hesitate. Susan, he said flatly, if someone had said those things to your kids, would you ever let them near them again? Susan didn't answer. Nathan made it clear. Margaret either apologized properly, with no excuses, no gaslighting, no half-hearted misunderstandings, or she stayed out of our lives. Margaret refused. She came to our house. She showed up at our front door, eyes red, voice shaking. She looked at Nathan, then at me. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Then she turned to me, her eyes cold. "You'll regret this." The moment Margaret muttered those last words at our doorstep, Nathan locked the door behind her. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just a sharp click of the deadbolt. We didn't wait. First thing the next morning, we were sitting in a lawyer's office. Margaret had thrown out the words grandparents' rights like a weapon, and we weren't about to ignore the threat. We needed to know exactly where we stood. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who had clearly seen cases like this before, leaned back in her chair after hearing everything. Then she shook her head. "Legally, she has no case." Nathan exhaled. I stayed quiet, waiting for her to explain. She tapped her fingers against the desk. "In this state, a grandparent can only push for visitation rights if they can prove the children are being neglected, or if there was a pre-existing, significant relationship that was suddenly severed. She has neither." The relief was immediate, but I knew better than to let my guard down. "What if she still tries?" I asked. The lawyer shrugged. "Then she wastes your time and money. But if she harasses you or tries to interfere with your parenting, that's when we take legal action." We left the office with a plan. Then, a week later, Margaret made her next move. It started with a flagged report from Lily's school. I received an automated email from the school's privacy office, informing me that an unauthorized request for student information had been made by someone identifying as a relative. The email reassured us that no information had been shared, but they wanted to make sure we were aware of the attempt. I called them back immediately. The administrator reassured me that the school had strict privacy policies. No information would ever be given out without parental consent. I thanked them, but my hands were already gripping the phone too tightly. Margaret was trying to go around us. Nathan didn't wait this time. He picked up his phone and sent a single message. "You are not seeing the kids until you apologize properly. No excuses, no deflections." Margaret's response came in the form of a long-winded email. It started with an apology, if you could even call it that. "I'm sorry if anything I said was misunderstood. That was never my intention. I love my grandbabies and I have only ever wanted the best for them." Then came the excuses. "I was simply concerned for their well-being. I thought I was offering wisdom, but clearly it was taken the wrong way. And of course the guilt trip. I don't know how much time I have left. I just want to be a loving grandmother again before it's too late." I didn't respond. Nathan didn't either. The silence must have driven her mad because the next day she escalated. A new email came in, this time carefully worded, but with a clear undertone of manipulation. "I am deeply hurt by this treatment. No grandparent should be separated from their grandchildren like this. I am genuinely worried about them. The tension in the family must be so hard on them. I just hope they're not suffering from all this conflict." Nathan's reply was short. "If you contact their school again or attempt any legal action, we will get a restraining order." 2 days of silence. Then, out of nowhere, a message from a distant cousin. "You might want to know Margaret has been meeting with a lawyer." I stared at my screen, stomach twisting. Nathan saw the message over my shoulder. He didn't say anything at first, just reached for his phone and started making calls. We didn't know for sure if she was going through with it, but we couldn't take chances. By the end of the night, we had everything we needed lined up. Every recorded conversation, every message, every incident. If Margaret wanted a fight, she was about to get one. The official notice arrived weeks later, thick with legal jargon but carrying a clear message. Margaret had actually filed for grandparents' rights. Nathan read it first. He didn't say a word, just passed the papers to me. Our lawyer wasn't surprised. We had warned her this might happen. She scheduled a meeting with us later that week to go over the case. "Your case is strong," she reassured us. "But we need to prepare thoroughly. Even though the law is in your favor, some judges lean toward keeping family ties intact. We need to make sure there is no doubt about why she should be denied." We got to work. Nathan and I spent hours gathering everything we had. The audio recordings from the Dollhouse. The text messages. The emails where Margaret had tried to manipulate us. The voicemails, some laced with barely veiled threats. The school report proving she had tried to go behind our backs for access to Lily. Nathan was livid. The last ounce of patience he had for his mother was gone. He instructed the lawyer to prepare for a restraining order if Margaret continued her harassment. Then he did something he had never done before. He called every family member, still speaking to her, and told them exactly what was happening. The shift was immediate. Margaret still had supporters, people who believed in her carefully curated image. But the moment they heard she was actually taking her own son to court, the tide changed. Some family members, particularly the older ones, stayed out of it. But others, the ones who had been hesitant before, finally saw her for what she was. The messages started rolling in. I had no idea she was going this far. "I can't believe she's doing this to her own grandchildren." I told her this was a bad idea. She wouldn't listen. Margaret must have realized she was losing ground because she tried one last tactic. She wrote a letter. Not to us. Not to Nathan. To the judge. It was carefully worded, dripping with self-pity. She claimed she was a loving grandmother being unfairly kept away from her grandchildren, saying that this was parental alienation. That I was a manipulative, tech-savvy daughter-in-law who had twisted her words and turned her son against her. The letter never made it to court. Our lawyer intercepted it, filed it away with the rest of the evidence, and assured us it would only hurt her case. Lily found out about the letter by accident. She saw it sitting on Nathan's desk one evening and asked what it was. He explained, carefully, in a way an 8-year-old could understand. She picked up the letter, looked at it for a long moment, then tore it in half. "I don't want to see her again," she muttered. That was it. That was all she said. After weeks of legal back and forth, the court date was finally set. Margaret showed up looking composed, dressed in muted colors, carrying herself with the same smug self-assurance she always had. She walked into that courtroom believing she had a case. She didn't. Our lawyer laid everything out in chronological order. The recordings, the messages, the failed attempts at manipulation. The judge listened in silence, flipping through the pages of evidence. Margaret tried to argue. She claimed she was taken out of context, that she never meant to hurt anyone, that she was just concerned for the children. The judge didn't buy it. By the time the third recording played, the one where she had told Lily that some mothers just aren't naturally maternal, her confidence started to crack. Her hands trembled as she tried to justify her words. Then she turned to me. Her voice was shaking now, but the venom was still there. "This is her fault," she snapped, pointing a manicured finger in my direction. "She's been manipulating my son, turning my grandchildren against me. This isn't about me. This is about her trying to erase me from their lives." The courtroom was silent. Then the judge spoke. "Mrs. Daniels," he said, voice steady, "what I see here is not a case of parental alienation. What I see is a pattern of emotional manipulation aimed at young children. You have repeatedly disrespected the boundaries of their parents and have shown no remorse for your actions." Margaret opened her mouth, but the judge wasn't done. "Your petition for grandparents' rights is denied." It was over. The ruling was final. Margaret had no legal grounds to force visitation. The judge even went a step further, making it clear that unless something drastically changed, any future attempts to reopen the case would be swiftly dismissed. Margaret sat there, hands clasped tightly in her lap, face eerily still. Then, without a word, she gathered her things and walked out. She didn't look at us. She didn't look at Nathan. The door closed behind her, and just like that, she was gone. The fallout was immediate. Margaret's last attempt at control had failed, and she knew it. Later that night, she posted a dramatic Facebook rant about how the legal system was corrupt, how her own son had betrayed her, how today's generation doesn't respect family anymore. At first, the comments were mixed, some relatives defending her, others staying neutral. But as more family members chimed in, recounting their own experiences with Margaret's manipulation, her support began to crumble. The conversation shifted from outrage to disappointment, and soon, even some of her defenders stopped engaging. She lost. Yeah. We went home that night feeling lighter than we had in years. There were no more threats, no more manipulation. The kids went to bed that night knowing they were safe, knowing no one was whispering doubts into their ears. Lily and Max still had therapy, still had questions, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't afraid. The dollhouse stayed. At first, I considered getting rid of it, thinking it had served its purpose. But something about it felt important. Not as a reminder of Margaret, but as a symbol that no one, not even family, would ever manipulate our children again.